So here we are, the Starboard All Star. I nearly said Airline, All Star Deluxe Lite. The reason I nearly said Airline is, well, the Starboard Inflatable All Star has long been a board that has run their airline technology. The airline itself from Starboard is quite a simple idea, to be perfectly honest. It's a single aramid rope, effectively, that runs over the nose cone of the board all the way back to the fin box. The purpose of that is to lock out a 14-foot or the 12'6" model board over its entire waterline length, making it as rigid as possible, meaning that every single stroke that you put down relates into power that's going to push you or as forwards through the water, or as you pull yourself forwards through the water on your paddle blade. Big fan of that board. I've loved it since its inception. I've used it in a number of events myself, and also more lately the sprint variant of the Airline that's recently come out. This board, well, we were surprised to see it from Starboard. It's a nice touch in terms of the price point that they've been able to achieve with it, but a 14-foot board without the Airline tech had me slightly nervous. You'll see from the footage in the video review that we've got for you now as to really just how rigid this board is, even without the Airline tech. In terms of rigidity, well, the board does flex a little bit more, as you would expect when compared to an Airline. We've actually drop tested it here in the shop across some trestles with the same gap between the two. And yeah, we've climbed on it with 90 kilos of weight, and we've measured how far it drops. Compared to an Airline board, it drops just under ½ an inch more than the Airline tech. That drop is purely simply because there isn't that secondary reinforcement that you get in the Airline All Star or the Airline Sprint. So there is no wider 28-inch width variation in the Deluxe Lite tech. That, with some of the features that ultimately are missing on this board compared to an Airline All Star, isn't necessarily a bad thing, in that the board then has kind of a slightly narrower appeal. And in terms of narrow appeal, what I mean by that is the All Star Airline isn't just a one-trick kind of round a racecourse pony. It is actually a really fast and efficient touring shape, which is hugely capable at eating up distance, but also putting a really good turn of performance around a racecourse. So let's run you down from the nose to the tail as we do in all of our videos. So this All Star that we have in 2024, and you've got to bear in mind this, the Deluxe Lite version, shares the same overall shape and rocker line as the full-blown Deluxe Airline variant. Well, it kind of sits somewhere between the outgoing 2023 model and also the previous year's downwind model. Now, what I mean by that is the rocker line isn't as hard and fast, flat water orientated as previous models, but it's not also as aggressive as we've seen in the All Star downwind model previously. It sits firmly between the two. Now, the reason why Starboard have done that is in 2024, you now have an Airline Sprint. Massive fan of that board. It's kind of my go-to now, really, particularly this year as well with some of the events that I'm back revisiting. Then, yeah, the Sprint for me works better. Were I out in the sea, a bit more chop, those type of conditions, then yeah, I'd go more towards the All Star overall shape. So we've got a little bit more rocker in the nose, slightly narrower nose that we have in the new All Star Airlines, and also this, the Deluxe Lite. But as you work your way back down the board, it broadens out readily, nothing too dramatic, nothing too quick, but that's ultimately releasing the board earlier and creating a little bit more glide and speed overall. Now, as I've touched on already, this board being the Deluxe Lite, it isn't as rich in features on deck as you've got with the Airline variant. This board here particularly just runs a single stringer. I've got to be honest, it's a little bit disappointing that they haven't run the stringer all the way to the nose of the board. I understand the limitations in terms of manufacture as to why it's not wrapped over the nose, because it's such a narrow nose. But the stringer itself does go all the way down to the tail, and then it runs back on the underside of the board. It does increase the rigidity of the board, but it's really, the rigidity is down to the overall material that's in this board. And Starboard with this, it is a woven linear drop stitch. They have termed it as a single layer drop stitch. I think single layer as a term is a little bit outdated now in terms of how it works, but it is actually stiffer and also around 10% lighter than the outgoing Zen Construction that we've had in previous years. So you've got a lighter and stiffer material within the board itself. As you work your way back down to the deck pad, the nice thing to see that they have retained in the model is the EVA buffers here on the outside that basically add an awful lot of control to the board. When you are paddling it, you can get the board right over on its rail confidently if needs be, and to steer it or even just deal with some chop. It's nice to have this security feature here. It does mean that the board still has to be folded, it can't be rolled, and that ultimately results in a bag which is quite, it's a bit like SpongeBob SquarePants, to be honest with you. When it's on your back and you're trying to walk through doorways, you can't, you've got to turn sideways and kind of shuffle through. But yeah, you end up with a big, slightly different bag shape that you would compared to a conventional ice up in that respect. But once you're on the water, it's well worth having these here, particularly at these slightly narrower widths of 26 and especially 24.5 inches in width. Because we are at the kind of the more budget end of this construction, being a Deluxe Lite, the handle is what we've seen in previous constructions, such as the Zen boards from previous years. It's great, it does the job. One thing I do like with it is that it does go flat, so it stays out of the way. But I think if you are carrying the board for any length of time, it's not the most comfortable of straps over a distance, but is that a reason not to get the board? No, but not by any stretch. It's just a nice to have, but it's reflected in the overall price point of the board. The deck pad then remains the same as you get on the Airline All Star Deluxe Construction. That runs back down to the valve, and then you'll find the leash is always secured there from Starboard from brand new. Let's take the board over now and just drop it onto its rail so you can see the underside and just how clear that is. So there's that stringer. It does run, as I say, all the way on the underside up to the nose, back down past the fin box, and encapsulates the tail before finishing up on the deck. And that runs all the way back down, really clean on the underside, no great surprises. It is worth noting though, Starboard's new fin box, they've gone out of their way to actually not use kind of a generic off-the-shelf fin box. It is their own design. Still a US fin box, supports then a really broad range of aftermarket fins, but hydrodynamically, it's just much more refined in terms of how it works and looks. So there you have it, the All Star Deluxe Lite. The one thing we haven't yet touched on is, well, if it's missing all of these features and fundamentally the airline system, well, is it still the same price? Well, no, it's not. There is quite a stark difference in price between this and the Airline Deluxe, which results in a saving or a difference of, in sterling, £450, which is not a small amount of money. Now, as a result, who's it for? Well, this, I think, as a board, in principle, is really for somebody who is wanting to try racing, is wanting a board which is more efficient through the water, and ultimately a step up from their all-rounder, or in the Starboard lineup, let's say the 11.2 in either Deluxe or Zen Construction, a board that gives you more without breaking the bank. Now, the board will still put in a great turnaround a race course. It will still be a very rigid product underfoot. I would question slightly Starboard's decision to list it really as an upper rider weight limit of around 105 kilos. I think that's a bit much. I think, you start to get up to those weights, you'll see certainly a bit more deflection within the board. But somewhere around 90 kilos, somewhere around there and under certainly on this board, yeah, bang for buck, it represents really, really good value. I think I would probably still choose this over, depending on condition, of say a 3 or 4 year old second hand, third hand Starboard All Star Airline. I would still choose this as a route to go down, particularly in light of the warranty that's available still on the board. So you're talking, 5 years on the construction. And I think for those principles alone, I would still plumb down the route of the new board over and above an outgoing airline model, say, as I say, 3 or 4 years old. So yeah, if you're looking for a taste of racing, a board that's more efficient than your all-rounder, more efficient than, the board that you've got currently, then yeah, it's worth considering. I would say as well that you can come down and try the board at our test center, and also the Airline All-Star, and also the Sprint Airline as well. So if you truly want to come and put the boards head to head to see where the money is, to see where the savings are to be had, well, come and visit us here at the Sup Company. Thanks for watching our video. If you've got any questions about what you've seen, why not give us a call in the shop or head over to thesupco.com. To stay up to date though with all of our videos, well, make sure you subscribe up here and hit the notification bell. But to see our next video, well, take a look up here.